Good evening, and here are today's Tropics for September 25th, 2019. Please note I'm not a meteorologist, and these videos are just a collection of my thoughts and opinions about the storms I'm talking about, and for any decision making, please consult National Hurricane Center, your local officials, or your National Weather Service office. So today I'm talking about Tropical Storm Karen and Hurricane Lorenzo. Just taking a look at this storm here, but anyway, I'm looking mostly at Tropical Storm Karen. So right now we can see here there's two main kind of convective bursts, one right here and the other here. So these are like two different circulations in a way. The low level circulation that Recon has been finding earlier or was finding earlier in the day is likely under this burst of convection right here. So it's around here probably in this region. And then there's some general cyclonic flow here and some convection bursting here, so it's likely that there's a mid-level low right here, and there's likely a mid-level low right here. As you can see, the mid-level low is not over the low-level center, so basically Karen is still decoupled, and it's really failed to come together into one, which is means it's got less of a chance to really become much of anything, because this is a huge impediment right now. It looks like the low level center has gotten too strong for its own good, and is now really competing with this mid level center. So it is failing to really significantly organize right now. So it's basically a mess right now. There's some shear from the northeast, at least on the eastern convective burst. It's not very strong, but you can see that it is getting sheared a bit off to the southwest. And then there is a bit of that southerly shear on the west side here. This is due to an upper low, and that means the mid-level center area is in low shear right now. If we look at the water vapor, you can get a better idea of these features. Here's an upper level low. It's relatively obvious right here. Here's a weaker one near Bermuda. So this is the main player right now. It's pretty satisfying to look at, actually. Some obvious cyclonic flow aloft here, and basically it's drawing in a lot of drier air from the northeast here, but some wetter air or moister air from here, and it is also causing some obvious southerly shear in this region, but it is also meaning that you're getting this like downstream upper ridge here. So as the flow kind of goes up here, then you start to get kind of this type of feature. So it looks like some upper ridging here, and it's relatively well aligned over the mid-level center convection, so you can see it's relatively healthy. There isn't much shear going on right now, but you can see that the axis is a bit to the west of the convection where the low-level center is, so it is getting a bit of that northeasterly shear. Again, it's not as strong as it has been, but it's still hitting it. So obviously we can see if it did organize and couple with the mid-level low, it probably would have been able to strengthen, just because this area is in a more favorable environment. We can see it's kind of bifurcated right now, and it's not doing too well because there's two kind of lows competing, and that's just leading to disorganization. So if we look at the GFS here, credit to Levi Cowan from Tropical Tidbits. You can see that right now this is Karen, so it's obviously quite weak. There's only a couple closed isobars. See, there's a pretty strong flow on the east side from the south, but only light northerly flow here. So that's a sign that you're getting a good amount of southerly flow just steering Karen right now. So that's not very good. It's relatively strong, so not very good right now, because that means the tropical cyclone will have a harder time trying to close off as it speeds to the north, and that means that I can't really get that convection rotating around. it just kind of gets moved to the north and can't really wrap around. So that means the Karen can't really organize, and since it's a weak system, it gets hit especially hard by this. The atmosphere kind of features right now are generally favorable, but this is one huge impediment, along with the disorganization of the tropical cyclone. There is another kind of thing that's a bit to the more favorable. There, you can see here there's a high at the surface, or high pressure at the surface, causing northerly flow here. But there's the big subtropical ridge to the east, so you're getting southerly flow here. So then between that, you've got a trough and cyclonic flow at the surface, which is probably helping generate these northerlies and keep Karen from opening up. So that's probably the one favorable part about the low level flow right now, but otherwise it's not so good. You can see here the H-WRF, it's better resolution here, so you can see more what's going on. You can see very moist air right now. So obviously that isn't a problem. It's not like you're getting convection trying to fire and then collapsing with like outflow boundaries and things like that. You can see on the infrared imagery here again that the convection, the problem isn't water vapor right now. If there's any problems for any of the convection, it's shear. You're not seeing any outflow boundaries, so it's relatively obvious that there is good relative humidity right now. See, this is 700 to 400 millibars, so this is about mid-level, and you can see here there's westerly flow under here, but easterly flow up here, and then you can see there's a bit of a closed low around here, around this area, so there's a mid-level trough here, and then mid-level low, which is Karen's mid-level center, and again you can see it's decoupled quite a bit. Karen is over here, and then this is like maybe around 100 nautical miles or so to the southwest. So this is a sign of a bit of that southerly or northeasterly shear that continues to affect Karen, and is just impeding a lot of this organization, which is why you see in a lot of the models really back off on the intensity. It just can't really get organized, and a lot of these more favorable conditions it's currently in are going to get squandered because it's disorganized. It's trying to organize. You can see the low center is well defined. It's probably like the most dominant one right now, which means it's kind of fighting against this mid-level low, which has better relative humidity. It's kind of stealing the favorable conditions from here, but there's no surface low here, so they kind of it's like a tug of war, and that means both of them it's almost like a stalemate. Both of them can't really get organized, and you end up with a weak, disorganized system. So here's the analysis in the GFS. It says 200 millibar wind, so you can see there's that upper level low here. Mark it out. So you've got this upper level low here. The upper level anticyclone right to the northeast or northeast of Karen. Anyway, that wasn't supposed to be an L, that's an H. Anyway, you can see that there is a bit of that easterly kind of flow aloft. It's quite light, so you might think, okay, why is there northeasterlies here? There's no northeasterlies even close to the system. But then you got to remember, shear isn't just a 200 millibar wind. There's that strong southerly flow coming together with some light easterly flow, which means that you're going to end up with northeasterly kind of difference between these lower and upper levels, and that's where you are getting that northeasterly shear from. As you can see, where the mid-level low is closer here, there's more kind of southeasterly flow aloft. It's still going to cause a bit of easterly shear once you factor in the low-level flow, but since the low-level flow is quite strong from the south, and the shear is also out of the south-southeast or southeast. That means a lot of the kind of meridional shear is kind of flow is in phase with the low levels and upper levels. So that means you're getting a lot of lower shear over the mid-level low. So you can see why some models might have strengthened Karen a lot more. They made the mid-level low a lot more dominant, which meant that Karen would be in lower shear, be able to organize, have kind of be stacked, but obviously that didn't happen, and you have a low level center, which is dealing with less favorable atmospheric conditions, and a mid-level center has better conditions, but is competing with this low-level center. If we look at the current, like the analysis of the relative humidity, so this is kind of like the H-work, but you can see a bigger picture. You can see that upper low again here. You can see there's a lot of dry air. Like if you're in Florida, you might have noticed this very dry air. It's not as humid as usual. So there's that general northeasterly fetch from the mid-latitudes that's coming down and, yeah, really drying out this area. But to the east of this upper level low, you can see that there's a lot of southwesterly fetch from the Caribbean coming up to where Karen is. So you're getting this moist air coming from the southwest. So that's keeping Karen within this bubble of high relative humidity air. So again, it's in a favorable environment. And this kind of with this kind of context, but yeah, with the disorganization, it ends up struggling. So if we look 84 hours out, so this is early Sunday morning, you can see that this upper level ridge or even mid level ridge has really cemented itself in. Here's the 500 millibar hot anticyclone, that general area. So you can see that Karen is getting steered to the southwest, at least in this model solution. And you can see the shear the upper level flow, it generally is in phase with this steering. So that means Karen might actually end up having low shear while getting kind of moved to the east rather than the strong northerly shear that models were previously suggesting. So but despite this, Karen can't really organize. This is because that strong ridge has really cut off a lot of that flow from the southwest instead. Because it's getting steered to the southwest, you're getting a lot of more northerly kind of flow in this area, which means, remember that fetch of dry air coming to Florida? Yeah, you're getting that mid-latitude fetch of dry air coming down south and into where Karen is. So you can see this dry air. So if you have convection trying to get going, it's going to end up struggling and then collapsing anyway. So this is pretty unfavorable if Karen is weak. If it somehow can strengthen like a lot, then it's possible that the vortex kind of can really get convection going on its own by its own things like surface convergence and wind kind of mixing up that water at the ocean and kind of moistening the air around it, especially if it has low shear and can get convection going as a stronger storm. Then it kind of moistens its own column and kind of walls it off from dry air. It's unlikely at this point because it can't really organize, and obviously you're not going to get a strengthening storm once it's disorganized. So the dry air is likely to actually infiltrate into the tropical cyclone. Looking at the H-WRF again, this is this is late Saturday evening. See, it resolved a few thunderstorms with this kind of moister air. So who knows whether this will actually happen. This is just what the H-WRF has resolved. But you can see in general the air is quite dry, mid-level relative humidity at like 50% or below, especially to the northwest of Cairn. There's very, very dry air. And you can see there's not even a trough in this mid-level area, unlike the current output where there's a well-defined trough and even low here. It seems that the mid-level low has been pretty much erased, which is a pretty bad sign for Cairn, which means it's basically there's not much of it left anymore. It's just a weak surface low. So this shows that there's been a lot of weakening basically in this time frame. Looking at the NHC track right here, it might be a bit hard to read because it kind of loops around. So here's the first point, obviously. Here's the second point, and then this third point here is the one on the right, and then it kind of loops around and does this. It's basically getting steered by this trough here that's kind of taking Jerry out for a bit. So it's currently getting steered by that southerly flow at the surface, and it'll continue like this until this trough kind of gets moved out, and then there's a strong ridge that ends up starting to build to the north, which means it can't really move more to the east because there's nothing steering it that way, so it starts moving to the south under that ridge, and then eventually starts to move more west, southwest, or west under that ridge. It's likely to be not too strong. It's not even supposed to get out over like 45 miles an hour in the forecast, and so it's not like there's going to be a strong storm coming here. It's going to be weak, likely disorganized, and the environment here won't be great. It's likely going to deal with very dry air, so it's probably not going to be a very notable system. Not very strong, basically. It's going to struggle with its own disorganization, likely, and the dry air around it. If we look at Hurricane Lorenzo, actually recently on the latest best track update, it had 85 knot winds, so it is a minimal category 2 now. That makes sense as it is trying to get an eye going. You can see right here that there is a kind of you can see right here there is a kind of lower or higher temperature here, so this is the scale. So that orange is slightly above negative 70 degrees Celsius. So yeah, this is also co-located with the center, so it's likely there is an eye trying to get going. The microwave passes have also shown that there is some type of eye wall, and you can also see with the convection it's rotating around, so there is hot tower activity and likely at least a partial eye wall. It's struggling a bit with dry air. You can see this warmer convection kind of in this area, so there's a bit of dry air, and that is causing Lorenzo to not rapidly strengthen. The air is relatively moist though in general, so you are getting a very large hurricane right now. It's unusual for this type of this area of the world, because usually the air is drier as it's near Africa and the Sahara Desert, so you tend to get smaller storms here that do grow with eye wall replacement cycles and just moister air towards the west, but there's very high relative humidity right now in this region, so it is allowing for a lot of this robust banding outside the core coming into the core. And this means that once an eye wall really gets going, it means you're going to get a lot more eye wall replacement cycles than you usually think, because there is a lot of banding that can wrap around and kind of choke off the inner eye wall. So once it does really get going, you might see kind of interruptions in this strengthening trend, despite the favorable environment, due to the internal kind of issues like eye wall replacement cycles. There was some northwesterly shear actually yesterday. Obviously it's gone because there's pretty stellar outflow coming out of the northwest quad, so that's definitely not a problem. I think the main problem is just dry air and eye wall replacement cycles. Either way, it's pretty good shot at the 2019's third major hurricane. There's no, this is no threat to land. It's likely to curve out to sea once it gets between 40 and 45 degrees north. So really the only landmass that has much of any shot being affected at all by Lorenzo is the Azores Islands, but this is very long range, and it's really too early to be seriously looking at like strong impacts. We'll have to see once it gets closer and once it recurves whether it will affect Azores or not. But in the time being, it's not any threat to land. So, and it's pretty sure shot to end up recurving. Anyway, that's about it for tonight. If you have any feedback, I'd appreciate it, and thank you for watching.